May 8, 1942. USS Lexington, Coral Sea, 400 miles northeast of Australia. The torpedo strikes amidships on the port side, approximately 15 feet below the waterline. Chief Petty Officer Thomas "Red" Callahan feels it before he hears it, a massive shudder that runs through the entire 888-foot length of the carrier, throwing him against a bulkhead in the forward damage control station. Then comes the sound. Not an explosion exactly, but a deep, resonant boom that seems to come from the ship's very bones. The lights flicker, go out. Emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in red. Callahan is on his feet instantly, grabbing his sound-powered phone. He's 38 years old, a career Navy man with 20 years in, the last 5 as a welder and damage control specialist. He's built like a fire hydrant, 5'7", barrel-chested, with arms like steel cables and hands scarred from 1,000 welding burns. Damage Control Central, this is Forward DC. What have we got? The voice that comes back is tight with controlled panic. Torpedo hit, port side, frame 60 to 65. Multiple compartments flooding. Engineering is trying to assess. The line goes dead. Callahan slams down the phone and turns to his team. 6 men, all looking at him with wide eyes. Right, we're going down to the second deck. Grab emergency shoring, welding kit, everything portable. Move. They scramble. Callahan leads them aft, heading toward the hit. The ship is already listing to port, maybe 3 degrees, enough to notice, enough to worry. Water is somewhere below them, rushing into spaces that should be dry, pulling the carrier down by the bow. They pass crew members heading the opposite direction, some organised, some running, some helping wounded. The smell hits Callahan as they descend. Seawater, fuel oil, and something electrical burning. Second deck. The passageway is chaos. Water is ankle-deep already, sloshing with the ship's movement. Damage control parties are trying to establish a perimeter, but nobody seems to know exactly where the breach is or how bad. Callahan grabs a lieutenant he recognises, Johnny Morrison, a good officer, former enlisted. "What's the situation?" Morrison's face is pale. "It's bad, Chief. The torpedo opened up at least 3 compartments, maybe more. Water's coming in faster than the pumps can handle. We're trying to shore up the bulkheads, but..." Another shudder runs through the ship. Not an explosion. Something worse. The sound of metal tearing. A bulkhead failing somewhere below. "Jesus Christ," Morrison whispers. Callahan feels the list increase. 4 degrees now, maybe 5. "Where's the captain?" Callahan asks. "Bridge. He's maintaining course and speed. We're still launching and recovering aircraft." "Of course they are. They're in the middle of a battle. Japanese carriers somewhere out there, American strike groups in the air. The Lexington can't just stop and focus on damage control. She has to keep fighting, which means she has to stay afloat." Callahan makes a decision. "Lieutenant, I need to see the damage myself. How do I get down there?" Morrison points aft. "Ladder down to 3rd deck, then forward. But Chief, it's flooding fast. I'm not sure." "I'm not asking permission, sir. I need to see what we're dealing with." Morrison hesitates, then nods. "Take 2 men, no more. We need the rest up here." Callahan grabbed Seaman First Class Eddie Martinez and Machinist's Mate Second Class Joe Dutch Vandenberg. Both are solid, experienced, calm under pressure. "With me, we're going swimming." They head aft to the ladder. Water is pouring down from above. A fire main must have ruptured. They descend into darkness, emergency lights barely penetrating the smoke and spray. 3rd deck. The water is waist deep now, dark with oil, freezing cold despite the tropical heat outside. The ship's list is worse here, maybe 6 degrees, and getting more pronounced by the minute. Callahan wades forward, feeling his way along the bulkhead. The sound of rushing water is everywhere, a roar like a waterfall confined in steel. Emergency lighting flickers. Somewhere ahead, men are shouting. They reach a compartment that should be crew berthing. The hatch is open and water is cascading through like a river. Callahan shines his flashlight inside. The torpedo didn't just puncture the hull, it tore it open. There's a jagged hole maybe 8 feet across, and through it Callahan can see daylight and the ocean. Water is pouring in with such force that the spray fills the entire compartment. Holy shit, Martinez breathes. Callahan plays his light around the space. The torpedo hit right at a structural junction. Frame members are bent, deck plates are buckled, and worse, much worse, the bulkhead to the adjacent compartment is cracked. Even as he watches, the crack is widening, rivets popping with sounds like gunshots. That bulkhead's going to fail, Dutch says. His voice is flat, matter of fact. When it does, the next compartment floods, and the one after that. Callahan knows he's right. This isn't a simple hole that can be patched. The structural damage is extensive. The torpedo didn't just let water in, it broke the ship's spine in that section. And now, with thousands of tons of water pressing against weakened bulkheads, there's a cascading failure in progress. If that continues, the Lexington will capsize and sink within the hour. We need to shore that bulkhead, Callahan says. Now. They wade back to the ladder, fighting against the current. The water is deeper now, chest high in places. Callahan's mind is racing, running through everything he knows about damage control, about structural engineering, about how ships break and how they're saved. Standard procedure would be to seal off the flooded compartments, establish a watertight boundary, and let the pumps slowly drain the spaces. But that bulkhead isn't going to hold long enough for standard procedure. It needs immediate reinforcement. They reach the ladder and climb back to the second deck. Callahan finds Morrison coordinating shoring parties. "We need heavy timber," Callahan says without preamble. "Everything we've got, and steel plate, and welding equipment, and I need authorization to flood 2 compartments deliberately." Morrison stares at him. "Flood compartments? Chief, we're trying to keep water out, not let more in. That bulkhead on third deck is going to fail. When it does, progressive flooding will take down half the port side. But if we deliberately flood the 2 compartments forward of the breach, controlled flooding through scuttles, we can equalize pressure on both sides of that bulkhead. Take the stress off it while we shore it up." I've never heard of that being done. Neither have I, but if we don't do something in the next 20 minutes, this ship is going down. Morrison looks at him for a long moment. Around them the chaos continues, men running, water rising, the ship groaning with stress. Finally Morrison nods. "Do it. I'll get you the equipment, and I'll inform the captain." 11:45 hours. Callahan and his expanded team, now 12 men, are back on the third deck with an improvised arsenal. Timber balks 8 inches square, steel plates salvaged from storerooms, portable welding equipment, hydraulic jacks, and enough determination to move mountains. The water is shoulder deep now. The ship's list is 7 degrees. Time is running out. "Martinez, Dutch, you're with me on the shoring," Callahan orders. "Wilson, Thompson, get that welding rig set up. Petrosky, you're on the scuttles. I need compartments A403 and A405 flooded to third deck level, controlled and measured. Everybody else, get that timber positioned." They work in near darkness, in freezing water, with the ship shuddering around them as Japanese bombs continue to fall topside. It's some of the most dangerous, difficult work any of them have ever done. Callahan wades into the flooded compartment adjacent to the torpedo breach. The bulkhead is bowed inward, water pressure forcing it to flex with each wave motion. Cracks are spreading like spiderwebs across the riveted steel. "We're going to brace it from this side," Callahan shouts over the roar of water. "But we can't just shore it straight. The pressure's too uneven. We need to create a compression frame, distribute the load across multiple points." He's making this up as he goes. There's no manual for this, no procedure, just 38 years of experience and an understanding of how steel behaves under stress. They position the first timber bulk at an angle, wedging it between the bulging bulkhead and a structural frame on the opposite wall. Dutch operates the hydraulic jack, slowly increasing pressure until the timber is bearing serious load. The bulkhead stops flexing, slightly. "Another one, offset by 3 feet. They repeat the process, then again and again. Each timber takes pressure off the failing bulkhead, spreading the water's force across multiple bracing points instead of concentrating it on compromised steel. While Callahan's crew shores the bulkhead, Petrosky is carefully opening scuttles in the 2 forward compartments. Water begins flooding in, controlled this time, measured. The idea is insane by every conventional damage control standard, deliberately letting water into a damaged ship. But Callahan's logic is sound. By flooding those compartments to the same level as the breach, the pressure equalizes. Instead of thousands of tons of water pressing on one side of the bulkhead with air on the other, there's water on both sides. The force trying to collapse the bulkhead drops dramatically. It's a gamble. They're adding weight to the ship, increasing the list. But if it works, they buy time. "How's that bulkhead looking?" Callahan calls to Martinez, who's watching the cracks. "Still spreading, but slower. Flood level in the forward compartments? Coming up to third deck now." The ship shudders. For a terrible moment, Callahan thinks the bulkhead is giving way. But it holds. The cracks stop spreading. "It's working," Dutch says, disbelief in his voice. "Jesus Christ, Chief, it's actually working." But they're not done. The bulkhead is shored, but it's still compromised. If the ship takes any serious wave action, if she maneuvers hard, if another torpedo hits anywhere nearby, the whole structure could collapse. They need to reinforce it permanently. "Wilson, get that welder down here." The welding team sloshes forward, dragging equipment in waterproof cases. Callahan points to the steel plates they brought. "We're going to weld reinforcement patches over those cracks. Not to seal them, there's too much water pressure, but to strengthen the steel, keep it from tearing further." "Chief, we can't weld underwater," Wilson protests. "We're not going to. Petrosky, stop the flooding. Let those forward compartments drain down through the lower scuttles. Slowly. We need to drop the water level in here by 2 feet. It takes 15 precious minutes. While they wait, Callahan has the crew position the steel plates, heavy sheets cut roughly to size with a torch. They hold them against the bulkhead where the worst cracks are, using more timber to brace them in place. The water level drops, slowly. The cracked sections of bulkhead emerge from the water, dripping and groaning. "Now, weld those plates on. We don't have much time before we need to reflood to maintain pressure equalization." Wilson and Thompson strike their arcs. The welding rods glow white-hot, sparks cascading into the water below. It's dangerous as hell, welding in a flooded compartment, water vapor everywhere, the ship moving beneath them. One wrong move and they'll electrocute themselves. But they're Navy welders. This is what they do. The steel plates fuse to the bulkhead. Not a perfect weld, there's no time for perfect, but strong enough. The cracks disappear beneath the patches. Callahan watches, calculating. They've shored the bulkhead, reinforced it with welded patches, equalized pressure with controlled flooding. But there's one more problem. The torpedo breach itself is still open. Water is still pouring in. Yeah, the pumps are handling it, barely. But if anything else goes wrong, if they lose power to the pumps, if another compartment floods, the balance tips. He makes another decision. "We're going to partially seal the breach." Dutch looks at him like he's insane. "Chief, that hole is 8 feet across, underwater, with current rushing through it. How the hell?" "We don't seal it completely. We can't. But we can reduce the flow. Look at the hole. It's not circular. It's a tear. Jagged. The edges are bent inward. If we can bend some of that steel back and shore it with timber and plates, we can cut the water flow by half, maybe more." "That's crazy. You got a better idea?" Dutch doesn't. They wade into the breach compartment, the one that took the direct hit. It's a nightmare space. Twisted metal, debris floating in the current, and that massive hole in the hull showing daylight and ocean. The force of water coming through is incredible. But Callahan notices something. The torpedo hit at an angle, not perpendicular to the hull. The explosion tore the steel in a diagonal pattern, creating a flap of bent hull plate that's partially blocking the hole. If they could somehow secure that flap, "We're going to pull that plate back into position and weld it," Callahan announces. "It won't seal the hole, but it'll restrict it. It takes all 12 men. They rig lines to the bent plate, using come-alongs and human muscle to slowly pull the steel back toward its original position. It fights them every inch, water pressure working against them, the metal groaning and flexing. But gradually, impossibly, the plate moves. They shore it with timbers. Then Wilson welds it, quick, crude tack welds that won't hold forever, but don't need to. Just long enough. The water flow through the breach drops noticeably. Callahan checks his watch. 12. 17 hours. They've been working for 57 minutes. The ship is still afloat, still fighting. Section 2. The decision. 12:30 hours. Bridge of USS Lexington. Captain Frederick Sherman stands at the windows watching his crew fight fires topside, while his damage control teams battle flooding below. He's 54 years old, a career officer who took command of the Lexington just 4 months ago. This is his first major engagement. His ship has been hit by 2 torpedoes and multiple bombs. She's listing 7 degrees to port. Fires are burning in 3 locations, and somewhere in the Pacific around him, Japanese and American carriers are still trading strikes. But she's still making 25 knots, still launching and recovering aircraft, still fighting. Commander Healy, the damage control officer, approaches. His uniform is soaked with seawater and sweat. "Captain, Chief Callahan's team has stabilized the torpedo damage. The bulkhead is holding." Sherman turns. "How bad is it really?" Healy doesn't sugarcoat it. "Bad, sir. We've got 3 compartments completely flooded, 2 more partially flooded with controlled water for pressure equalization. The breach is partially sealed but still taking on water. Pumps are keeping up but barely. We've lost the port-forward aviation fuel tank, ruptured in the hit. Fuel is mixing with seawater in the bilges. Can we save the ship?" "Right now, yes. Chief Callahan's solution is holding." "But, sir," Healy hesitates. "Speak freely, Commander." "What he did down there, the controlled flooding, the improvised shoring, welding patches onto a stressed bulkhead, none of that is in any damage control manual. He basically invented a new technique on the spot. It's brilliant, but it's also fragile. If we take another hit anywhere on that side, if we have to make any high-speed maneuvers, if anything shifts, the whole thing comes apart." "Yes, sir." Sherman looks out at the ocean. His air group is still engaged. The Japanese aren't finished, and neither is he. "What does Callahan need?" "Time, sir, and calm seas. If he gets another hour, he can reinforce the patches, improve the shoring, make it more permanent." "He's got it. Tell him to take whatever he needs. Men, materials, anything. That chief just saved this ship. Now I need him to keep saving it." "Aye, aye, sir." 12:45 hours, 3rd deck. Callahan's team is exhausted. They've been working in chest-deep water for over an hour, fighting the ship's wounds with nothing but determination and improvised engineering. Every man is soaked, freezing, running on adrenaline, but they're not done. Callahan studies their work with a critical eye. The bulkhead is shored and patched. The breach is partially sealed. Pressure is equalized, but it's all temporary. Emergency measures that might last hours or might fail in minutes. He needs to make it permanent. "Listen up!" Callahan shouts over the noise of pumps and rushing water. "We're going to reinforce everything we just did. Double the shoring, add more patches, create redundancy in every system, because if this fails, we don't get a second chance." Martinez slumps against a bulkhead. "Chief, we're dead on our feet. We need—" "I know, and I'm going to get you relief. But first, I need 30 more minutes. Can you give me 30 minutes? The men look at each other. Then, one by one, they nod. They go back to work. Callahan oversees the reinforcement. More timber goes in, creating a lattice of bracing that distributes stress across the entire frame. More steel patches are welded on, layered over the first set like armor plate. They even fashion a crude baffle system to redirect water flow away from the weakest points. It's ugly. It's improvised. It's nothing like the neat, by-the-book damage control they trained for, but it's working. By 1320 hours, Callahan is satisfied. Not happy, there's nothing to be happy about, but satisfied that the ship will stay afloat long enough to get to port. He's about to head back to the second deck when he hears it. A sound. Mechanical. Wrong. He freezes, listening. There, a clicking sound, rhythmic, coming from somewhere forward, and underneath it, a hissing. "Everyone out, now!" Callahan roars. The men don't question. They head for the ladders. Callahan stays, playing his flashlight around the compartment, trying to locate the source of the sound. There, a fuel line, running along the overhead. It's vibrating, clicking against a support bracket. And the hissing. Gas vapor. The line is damaged, leaking fumes. Callahan's blood runs cold. The torpedo ruptured the aviation fuel tank. That fuel is mixing with seawater in the bilges, creating an explosive vapor. And now there's a damaged fuel line right above their workspace, leaking more vapor into an enclosed space filled with recent welding work. All it needs is one spark. "Chief, come on!" Dutch yells from the ladder. Callahan takes one last look at their work, the shoring, the patches, the improvised brilliance that's keeping the Lexington afloat. Then he turns and runs. He's halfway up the ladder when the compartment explodes. Section 3. The Fire. 13:27 hours. The explosion isn't large, not like a bomb or torpedo. It's the aviation fuel vapor igniting, a sudden whoosh of flame that fills the compartment and belches up through hatches and ventilation. Callahan feels the heat even through his wet clothing. He climbs faster, reaching the second deck just as the hatch below slams shut automatically, fire sensors triggering the ship's damage control systems. "Is anyone still down there?" Lieutenant Morrison demands. "Negative. We all made it out." Callahan's heart is pounding. "But we've got fire in the flooded compartments. Fuel vapor must have accumulated while we were working." Morrison's face goes pale. "If fire reaches those shoring timbers, they'll burn, and when they do, that bulkhead fails, and the ship goes down." They stare at each other. All that work, all that innovation, all that desperate improvisation, and now fire threatens to undo it all. "We need to flood those compartments completely," Callahan says. "Drown the fire before it spreads. That'll add thousands more tons of water, increase the list." "I know, but if we don't, the fire burns through our damage control work, and we sink anyway. At least this way we control it." Morrison makes the call to the bridge. 2 minutes later, the authorization comes back. Flood it. Petrosky and his team open every scuttle and valve they can reach. Seawater pours into the burning compartments. Steam hisses as water meets flame. The fire fights back, burning through the new water, finding fuel in floating pools. But gradually, inevitably, the water wins. The flames die, the smoke clears. The fire is out. But the Lexington is now listing 9 degrees to port, and she's noticeably lower in the water, bow down. On the bridge, Captain Sherman receives the reports. His damage control officer's face tells the story before the words do. "Sir, we've contained the fire, but we've had to flood additional compartments. Current list is 9 degrees. We've lost significant buoyancy forward. Engineering estimates we're down by the bow approximately 3 feet more than normal. Can we counterflood starboard to correct the list?" "We can try, sir, but we're already carrying a lot of extra water. Any more weight and we risk." The ship shudders, not from enemy action, from her own stress. The hull is complaining, metal groaning under the unbalanced load. Sherman makes a decision. "Reduce speed to 15 knots, begin counterflooding, but cautiously, and get me Chief Callahan." 5 minutes later, Callahan stands on the bridge, still dripping, looking like he's been through hell. Which he has. Sherman studies him. "Chief, I understand you've saved this ship, twice." "Just doing my job, sir." "Commander Healy tells me the techniques you used aren't in any manual. Where'd you learn them?" "Didn't learn them, sir. Made them up." Sherman almost smiles. "Well, they worked. Now I need you to tell me honestly. Will your repairs hold? Can we make it to port?" Callahan considers. "Depends on the port, sir. Pearl Harbor is 3,500 miles. That's optimistic. But if we can reach Tongatapu or Noumea, maybe 1,500 miles, we've got a chance. Assuming we don't take any more hits. Assuming the weather holds. Assuming those bulkheads don't decide to fail anyway." "So you're saying it's possible?" "I'm saying it's not impossible, sir." Sherman nods. "That's good enough." 14:30 hours. The battle is winding down. The Japanese carriers have withdrawn, so has the American task force. Both sides are licking their wounds, counting their losses, claiming victory. For the Lexington, the fight is just beginning. Callahan is back on the third deck with his team, monitoring the repairs. The water is deeper now, chest high even on the second deck in some areas. The ship is heavy, sluggish, wallowing in the swells. But the shored bulkheads are holding. For now. "Chief, we've got a problem," Dutch calls from forward. "The patches we welded, they're starting to weep. Water's seeping through the welds." Callahan splashes over. Sure enough, small streams of water are trickling through gaps in the welds. Not catastrophic, but not good. The welds were done fast, under terrible conditions. They were never going to be perfect. "Can we re-weld them?" Not underwater, we'd need to pump down these spaces again. Which we can't do because we need the water for pressure equalization. Callahan thinks. Okay, new plan. We can't stop the leaking, so we manage it. Rig collection systems. Canvas, buckets, whatever. Channel the leakage to the pumps. We don't need perfect, we just need survivable. They improvise again. Canvas tarps rigged below the leaking patches. Buckets positioned to catch drips. Hoses running to the pumps. It's a Rube Goldberg solution, but it works. The leakage is contained. Martinez laughs, a slightly hysterical sound. Chief, we're saving a carrier with buckets and tarps. Whatever works, Martinez, whatever works. 16:30 hours. 4 hours after the torpedo hit. The Lexington is still afloat, still making way. She's hurt, badly hurt, but alive. The list has been partially corrected to 6 degrees. The fires are out, the flooding is contained, and in the lower decks, Red Callahan's improvised damage control system is holding. Captain Sherman sends for him again. Chief, the Navy's going to want a full report on what you did today, the techniques you invented. They'll probably make you explain it to a board of engineers. Yes, sir. They're also going to recommend you for a medal, the Navy Cross most likely. Callahan shifts uncomfortably. Sir, I was just doing your job. I know. But not many men invent new damage control procedures under fire while saving a carrier. Take the recognition, Chief. You earned it. What I'd really like, sir, is a cup of coffee and 8 hours of sleep. Sherman does smile this time. Granted, but first, can this ship make it to Tongatapu? Callahan thinks about the shoring below, the welded patches, the controlled flooding, the improvised brilliance holding together by prayer and stubbornness. Yes, sir, she'll make it. And she does. Section 4. Tongatapu. May 11th, 1942. 08:30 hours. Tongatapu Harbour, Tonga. The Lexington limps into harbour under her own power, listing down by the bow but floating. She's made 1,400 miles in 3 days at reduced speed, fighting her wounds every nautical mile. On the pier, Navy engineers and repair crews are waiting. They've been warned about the damage, but nothing quite prepares them for what they see when the carrier is made fast and they go aboard. Commander Arthur McKee, a senior naval architect from Pearl Harbor sent specifically to assess the Lexington, descends into the flooded compartments with his team. He's expecting standard battle damage, holes patched with collision mats, basic shoring, maybe some emergency welding. What he finds stops him in his tracks. The third deck is a forest of timber bracing, dozens of balks arranged in complex geometric patterns, each positioned to distribute load across multiple points. Steel patches are welded on in layers, overlapping like armour scales. Compartments are deliberately flooded to precise levels, and everywhere, improvised solutions. Canvas redirecting water flow, collection systems channeling leaks, even pressure relief ports cut into bulkheads to prevent catastrophic failure. McKee has been designing warships for 20 years. He's seen battle damage from the Great War, studied every carrier sinking in history, written papers on damage control theory. He's never seen anything like this. Who designed this? He asks the lieutenant, showing him around. Chief Petty Officer Callahan, sir. He's the one who saved the ship. Where is he? Asleep, sir. Has been for 16 hours. Captain's orders. No one wakes him. McKee studies the shoring system, taking photographs, making sketches. This is revolutionary. The controlled flooding to equalize pressure. I've theorized about it, but never seen it done. And this compression framing system. He runs his hand along a timber bulk. It's distributing the load across the entire structural section, like a bridge arch, but improvised from scratch. Will the ship make it to Pearl? The lieutenant asks. With this damage control work? Yes, absolutely. McKee shakes his head in wonder. This chief, Callahan, he just rewrote the book on carrier damage control. Someone needs to get his methods documented, standardized, taught to every damage control team in the Navy. 1400 hours. Callahan finally wakes. He's in his bunk, still wearing his work clothes, too exhausted to have undressed 3 days ago. Every muscle aches. His hands are raw from handling rough timber and steel. burns on his forearms from welding spatter. He drags himself to the mess, gets coffee and food. Word has spread through the ship about what happened in the lower decks. Men he doesn't know nod at him respectfully. The ship's cooks give him extra bacon. He's halfway through breakfast when Lieutenant Morrison finds him. "Chief, the brass wants to see you. That commander from Pearl, McKee, he's got about 1,000 questions." Callahan sighs. He knew this was coming. "Can I finish my coffee first?" He said, "Whenever you're ready. No rush." That's nice. Unusual, but nice. An hour later, Callahan meets McKee in one of the carrier's conference rooms. The naval architect has spread out his sketches and photographs across the table. "Chief Callahan, thank you for seeing me. I'm Commander McKee, Bureau of Ships. I've been studying your damage control work." "Yes, sir." "Where did you learn these techniques?" "Nowhere, sir. Made them up as I went." McKee leans back. "Chief, I need you to understand something. What you did, the controlled flooding, the compression shoring, the layered patching, these aren't standard procedures. They're not taught at any Navy school. As far as I know, they've never been attempted before in combat." "Yes, sir. I figured they probably weren't standard. But the standard stuff wasn't going to work. That bulkhead was going to fail. The ship was going to sink. So I tried something different. And it worked." "Yes, sir. It worked." McKee picks up his notes. "I'm going to recommend that your methods be incorporated into revised damage control doctrine. Every carrier, every major combatant should have crews trained in these techniques. You may have just saved not only the Lexington, but every ship that follows." Callahan doesn't know what to say to that. I just did what needed doing, sir." "Chief, that's what makes it brilliant. You saw a problem that had no solution, and you invented one. Under fire, in the dark, in flooded compartments, while the ship was fighting a battle." McKee extends his hand. "The Navy is lucky to have you." They shake. Section 5. Pearl Harbor. May 27th, 1942. Pearl Harbor, Naval Shipyard, Hawaii. The Lexington makes it to Pearl under her own power. She's given priority docking at one of the large dry docks, the same ones that repaired battleships after December 7th. When the water is pumped out and the carrier's hull is exposed, the crowd of shipyard workers and Navy personnel gathered to watch falls silent. The torpedo damage is visible as a massive wound in the hull, jagged, torn metal, bent frames, a hole you could drive a car through. But what draws everyone's attention is the damage control work visible through the breach. Timber, steel patches, welded reinforcements, all of it improvised, asymmetric, nothing like the neat repair work done in a shipyard, but clearly functional, clearly brilliant. Word spreads fast. This is the carrier saved by a welder. Inside the Navy's Bureau of Ships, engineers are already studying McKee's report and Callahan's techniques. Debates are raging. "Controlled flooding is too dangerous," argues one officer. "You're deliberately adding weight, reducing stability." "But it saved the Lexington," counters another. "Without pressure equalization, that bulkhead fails and the ship sinks." The compression shoring is interesting, but it requires precise positioning. In combat conditions, with untrained crew, they might get it wrong. Then we train them. We write manuals. We run drills. We make Callahan's improvisation into standard procedure. The debates continue for weeks, but slowly, inevitably, consensus forms. Callahan was right, and his methods need to be taught. June 15th, 1942. Damage Control School, Pearl Harbor. Chief Petty Officer Red Callahan stands in front of a classroom full of damage control specialists from across the Pacific Fleet. He's not comfortable being an instructor. He's a doer, not a talker. But the Navy has made it clear. His knowledge is too valuable to stay locked in his head. "Right," he begins awkwardly. "So, when you've got a compromised bulkhead under water pressure, the standard response is to shore it from the dry side. But if the pressure differential is too great, no amount of shoring from one side will hold it." He points to a diagram on the blackboard. "That's when you need to equalize pressure. Controlled flooding of adjacent compartments, just enough water to match the pressure on both sides of the bulkhead. It sounds crazy. You're adding water to a sinking ship, but it works." Hands shoot up. Questions, concerns, pushback. Callahan answers them all, patiently, drawing on his experience from the Lexington, showing the math, explaining the engineering. By the end of the session, the skepticism has faded. These are practical men, sailors and engineers who understand that survival matters more than doctrine. One more thing, Callahan says as the class ends. Everything I showed you, the controlled flooding, the compression shoring, all of it, these aren't magic solutions. They're techniques, tools. The real skill is knowing when to use them, when to follow the manual, and when to throw it away and improvise. A young seaman raises his hand. How do you know when to improvise? Callahan thinks. When the manual says you're dead, and you're not ready to accept that. Section 6. Doctrine. July 1942. Bureau of Ships, Washington, D.C. Rear Admiral Edward Cochrane, Chief of the Bureau of Ships, reads the revised damage control manual with a mix of fascination and frustration. Fascinating because the new techniques are clearly effective. Frustrating because they represent such a departure from established doctrine. These procedures were invented by a chief petty officer, he asks his staff. Yes, sir, Chief Callahan, USS Lexington. Career enlisted, 20 years service, welding and damage control specialist. Cochrane shakes his head. And none of our naval architects, none of our engineering officers, none of the PhDs we employ thought of this. Apparently not, sir. It took someone actually facing the problem in real time, under fire, to come up with the solution. There's a lesson there, Cochrane thinks, about the value of practical experience versus theoretical knowledge. About listening to the men who actually do the work, instead of just the ones with diplomas. All right, approve the manual revisions, and I want Callahan's techniques incorporated into training at all damage control schools. Fleet-wide dissemination. Every carrier, every cruiser, every destroyer. Their damage control teams need to know this. Yes, sir. And one more thing. I want a study done. A comprehensive analysis of every carrier damaged in combat since the war started. I want to know how many ships might have been saved if these techniques had been available earlier. The study is completed in September. The results are sobering. USS Yorktown, torpedoed at Midway and later sunk. Might have been saved with aggressive, controlled flooding and compression shoring. HMS Ark Royal, torpedoed in the Mediterranean, likely could have reached port with pressure equalization techniques. Multiple Japanese carriers at Midway, several probably sank from progressive flooding that could have been controlled. The report estimates that Callahan's techniques, if widely known and implemented, could improve carrier survival rates by 30 to 40% in cases of underwater damage. 30 to 40%. That's the difference between losing a fleet and keeping one. August 1942. USS Enterprise, Pacific Theatre. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Packard, the Enterprise's damage control officer, briefs his teams on the new procedures. He's just received the updated manual from Pearl, along with photographs and diagrams from the Lexington repairs. I know this looks unconventional, he tells his men. Controlled flooding, improvised shoring, all of it. But it's been tested in combat. It works. And if we take a torpedo, these techniques might be the difference between making it home and going down. The crews study the diagrams, practice the procedures, run drills in the lower decks simulating damage, timing their responses. 2 months later, in the waters off Guadalcanal, a Japanese torpedo slams into the Enterprise's starboard side. The damage control teams respond instantly. They shore the compromised bulkheads using compression framing. They deliberately flood 2 adjacent compartments to equalize pressure. They weld reinforcement patches onto stressed areas. The Enterprise survives. Packard writes in his after-action report, damage control procedures based on Chief Callahan's techniques from USS Lexington proved invaluable. Ship was saved through application of these methods. Recommend continued emphasis in all training. The report goes into the files, and across the Pacific, on carrier after carrier, damage control teams are learning the same lessons. How to save a ship that should sink. How to improvise when the manual isn't enough. How one welder's crazy idea became the standard that saves lives. Section 7. The Reunion. November 1943. Pearl Harbor Naval Base. The war has been raging for nearly 2 years. The Pacific has seen dozens of carrier battles, Hundreds of ships damaged, thousands of lives saved or lost based on split-second decisions and damage control competence. Chief Petty Officer Red Callahan is still in the fleet, now assigned to USS Saratoga as Chief Damage Control Instructor. He's trained hundreds of sailors, written sections of the official manual, received the Navy Cross, just as Captain Sherman predicted. But he doesn't think about any of that much, he just does his job. Today, he's been summoned to the base commander's office. No explanation, just an order to report at 1400 hours. He arrives in his dress uniform, puzzled. Inside, he finds an unexpected gathering. Commander McKee, now promoted to captain, Admiral Cochrane from the Bureau of Ships, several other senior officers, and Captain Frederick Sherman, formerly of the Lexington, now commanding the USS Essex. Chief Callahan, Sherman says, shaking his hand warmly. Good to see you again. Sir, what's this about? Admiral Cochrane steps forward. Chief, we wanted to bring you here to show you something. Captain McKee? McKee spreads out a series of documents on the table. After-action reports, damage assessments, survival statistics. Chief, since your techniques were incorporated into fleet doctrine, we've seen measurable improvements in ship survival rates. Carriers that would have sunk are making it to port. Damage that would have been catastrophic is being contained. We estimate that your methods have directly contributed to saving at least 6 major combatants and over 4,000 lives. Callahan stares at the reports. I didn't. You saved the Lexington, Sherman says quietly. And in doing so, you saved everyone who learned from what you did. Every damage control team that applied your techniques. Every ship that stayed afloat because someone remembered your lesson about controlled flooding or compression shoring. You changed how the Navy fights, Cochrane adds. Not with better weapons or tactics, but with better survival. The ability to take a hit and keep fighting. That's worth more than any battleship. Callahan doesn't know what to say. He's just a welder, a chief petty officer who did what needed doing when his ship was sinking. There's one more thing, McKee says. He pulls out a final document. The Navy is establishing a new rating, Damage Control Specialist. The training program will be based largely on your techniques, and we'd like you to be the first Master Chief in the new rating. Help us build the program, train the trainers. Master Chief, the highest enlisted rank, a position of authority and respect. Callahan stops, starts again. I'm honoured, sirs, but I'm not a teacher. I'm a wrench turner, a welder. I work with my hands. And that's exactly why you're perfect for it, Sherman says. The Navy has plenty of theorists. What we need are more men like you, practical, innovative, willing to throw out the rulebook when the situation demands it. Men who can look at an impossible problem and find a solution. Callahan thinks about the Lexington, about that moment in the flooded compartment when he realised the standard procedures wouldn't work, when he had to choose between following doctrine and trying something new. He thinks about the men he's trained, the ships that survived, the lives saved. Yes, sir, he says finally. I'll do it. Section 8. Legacy. December 1945. Naval War College, Newport, Rhode Island. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. The Pacific Fleet is standing down, ships returning to port, sailors going home. But the lessons learned are being preserved. In a classroom at the War College, a young naval architect named David Thompson presents his thesis. Innovative Damage Control, Case Studies from the Pacific War. The centerpiece of his paper is the USS Lexington, Coral Sea, May 1942. The torpedo hit, the flooding, and Chief Callahan's improvised solution. What makes this case significant, Thompson explains to the board of officers reviewing his work, is not just that it worked, it's that it represented a fundamental shift in thinking. Prior doctrine viewed damage control as a defensive action. Seal the breach, stop the flooding, save what you can. Chief Callahan approached it differently. He saw damage control as active problem solving. He added water to a sinking ship. He deliberately compromised some systems to save others. He invented techniques that didn't exist in any manual. One of the reviewing officers asks, "And this has been incorporated into current doctrine?" "Yes, sir, extensively. The The post-war damage control manual includes controlled flooding procedures, compression shoring techniques, and improvised reinforcement methods, all derived from Callahan's work. The Navy estimates these techniques improved carrier survival rates by approximately 35% over the course of the war. 35%, another officer murmurs. That's remarkable. Yes, sir. In practical terms, it means that of the dozen carriers that took serious torpedo or bomb damage after May 1942, at least 4 of them survived specifically because of techniques learned from the Lexington incident. Without those techniques, they likely would have been lost. Thompson pulls out a photograph. It shows USS Franklin, March 1945, after taking massive bomb damage off Japan. The carrier is listing, burning, hundreds dead. The Franklin took more damage than any carrier in the war and survived. Her damage control teams used every technique Chief Callahan pioneered: controlled flooding, compression shoring, improvised patches, all of it. She made it home. 832 men died, but over 2,000 survived because the ship stayed afloat. The board is silent. Gentlemen, Thompson concludes, the Pacific War was won by many factors: industrial production, code breaking, superior tactics, but underlying all of that was a simple truth. Our ships could take damage and keep fighting. The Japanese lost carriers at Midway, at Philippine Sea, at Leyte Gulf, not always because we hit them harder, but because when hit, they couldn't save themselves. We could. And a significant part of that capability came from one welder who refused to accept that his ship was doomed. Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, Washington. Master Chief Thomas "Red" Callahan, now 56 years old, walks through the shipyard where he spent the last 5 years as senior damage control instructor. He's training the post-war Navy, passing on lessons learned in blood and seawater. A young ensign, fresh from the academy, approaches. Master Chief, I'm Ensign Williams, new damage control officer on the Essex. I was hoping you could give me some advice. Callahan studies him. 22, maybe 23. Eager, nervous, carrying the weight of responsibility for keeping 1,000 men alive if things go wrong. What kind of advice? I've read all the manuals, studied the case studies, but I still feel like I don't know what to do if we actually take a hit. How did you know what to do on the Lexington? Callahan considers the question. How do you explain instinct? Experience? The ability to see a solution that doesn't exist yet? Kid, here's what I learned. The manuals are good. Follow them when you can. But ships don't read manuals. Every damage is different. Every situation is unique. So when the manual isn't enough, you use your head. You look at what you have: timber, steel, men, time, and you figure out how to turn that into a solution. But what if I make the wrong choice? Then you make another choice, and another. You keep adapting until you find something that works. The only wrong choice is giving up. Williams nods slowly. Did you ever think you wouldn't save the Lexington? Callahan is quiet for a moment. Every minute. I thought we were done. Thought that bulkhead would fail. Thought the ship would roll over. Thought we'd all end up in the water. But thinking you're going to fail and accepting failure are different things. I wasn't ready to accept it, so I kept trying. And you saved the ship. We saved the ship. Me and 11 other guys who worked like hell in flooded compartments, while the world exploded around us. I just came up with the idea. They made it happen. William straightens. Thank you, Master Chief. Good luck, Ensign. And remember, when things go bad, and they will go bad, you've got men depending on you. Don't let them down. William salutes and leaves. Callahan watches him go, then turns back to the shipyard. Modern carriers are under construction, massive things, bigger than the Lexington, more sophisticated, more capable. Each one is being built with improved damage control systems based on lessons from the war, lessons that started with a welder and a crazy idea. Epilogue. The official US Navy records, preserved in the National Archives, document the impact. USS Lexington, saved May 1942, through innovative damage control, returned to service June 1942. Continued operations until being sunk by Japanese aircraft, November 1943, 18 months of additional service beyond her predicted loss. Damage control doctrine revised. July 1942. Techniques developed by CPO Callahan incorporated fleet-wide. Ship saved using new techniques. USS Enterprise, October 1942. USS Yorktown II, April 1943. USS Franklin, March 1945. USS Bunker Hill, May 1945. Plus numerous cruisers and destroyers. Estimated lives saved, over 6,000 sailors who would have been lost if their ships had sunk. Master Chief Thomas Callahan, retired 1958 after 36 years of service. Navy Cross, Legion of Merit, numerous other decorations. Died 1982, age 78. His legacy. Every damage control manual in the US Navy. Every technique for saving a wounded ship. Every sailor trained to look at an impossible problem and find a solution. The lesson was simple. Sometimes the rulebook isn't enough. Sometimes you have to invent new rules. And sometimes, one man with a welder's touch and an engineer's mind can change how an entire navy fights. The Japanese had better ships at the start of the war, better torpedoes, better trained pilots. But they never learned what Red Callahan taught the US Navy in a flooded compartment on a dying carrier. How to refuse to sink. How to turn defeat into survival. How to take the worst hit imaginable and keep fighting. That's not in any manual. That's just human stubbornness and American ingenuity. And in the end, it made all the difference.